My name is Elisa. I'm a second-year master's student at the University of Western Ontario. I study earthquakes and anything associated around earthquakes, as well as, I guess you'd say, quakes that happen at a different scale in different locations throughout the galaxy. I also did my undergraduate in geophysics at the University of Waterloo. And I was an art student in high school prior to going to the University of Waterloo. That's what was interesting. Rebecca?
So my name is Rebecca. I currently go to the University of Waterloo, and I'm in my third year of Earth Sciences, specializing in hydrogeology. Hydrogeology is basically what it sounds like, geology mixed with hydrology, so subsurface water. It also incorporates some civil engineering and geological engineering classes. And yeah.
My name is Khaled Zabalawi. I'm a student at London Central Secondary School, grade 12 to be specific, and I like to compete at hackathons or the science fair in general, and just I want to be an engineer, so that's interesting.
So my understanding is we're all going to be giving this workshop / presentation at the NASA Space Apps Hackathon, which is taking place over October 1st to October 3rd, more or less. And our talk should be more or less focused on time management, getting things done, moving to your next step, kind of stepping closer towards whatever future goals you have, as well as time management specifically in the pandemic. We also have somewhat 3 generations of academia right here, so we can ask questions back and forth. How have things changed since we last left, say, high school or undergrad, as well as what can you look forward to in undergrad and grad school? So the first question that I came up with is, what does your average day look like prior to the pandemic? So we'll probably be splitting most of our questions into 2 parts.
Yeah, so my average day before the pandemic, I would go to school, come back for homework, exercise after maybe, spend time with family and friends in the weekend, and I would generally in the weekend go out with friends. And then after the pandemic, that changed. It changed the routine. I would wake up, plan some like tasks or goals for the day, and then spend time with friends like online only after I finish the task for the day. So, yeah.
So my average day before the pandemic, it kind of differed depending on if I was on a co-op term or if I was on an academic term. So on a typical study term, I would wake up early in the morning, head to campus, get my work done, finish the assignments I had that were due that day, attend lectures. I was a teaching assistant for a course in the winter, so I would go and do that. I also had a lot of meetings spread out throughout the day as I'm pretty involved in campus life, so I'd have meetings with clubs, both with students and with faculty. And then I think the biggest part of my day before the pandemic that's different than my day now was I spent a lot of time with my friends just between classes or at night, hanging out, which obviously isn't the case now. So during the pandemic, my days are very different, especially since my last co-op, I was supposed to be doing field and lab work in the Northwest Territories, but it got canceled because of coronavirus. So I was working at home. So now I pretty much just kind of wake up whenever I wake up and just start going through my to-do list for the day.
So what does my day look like before the pandemic? So in a master's degree, you usually have, at Western anyway, you have 4 courses you do need to take in the Earth Sciences department as part of your graduation requirements. So a lot of my first year was actually attending courses, attending seminars, attending forums where my face was expected to show up, and I did get graded at a number of those events. In between that, I also had TA shifts. So a lot of my day was pretty erratic depending on what day it was. I'd show up to my office ideally before 9 o'clock, get in like crunch work. I would also make coffee as like my first Kickstarter event once I got to my office. So that would start my day. I'd either go to class or attempt to do a reading, take a break at lunchtime, go outside and read back when the weather was good, and then come back inside, either go prepare my lab that I had to run or mark assignments, go to class, or work on my research. And then I would try to end my day anywhere between from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. depending on the tasks that I had. That was my life pre-pandemic. I was still in the course-heavy portion of my degree when the pandemic did start. So I basically went home, did the same thing, except I woke up later because I had the luxury of not going to school at a distance. Still started my day with coffee as just general morning ritual, and attempted to do homework, try to finish all my writings. Life was a lot harder for me for the first few months transitioning, so I got less research done, got a lot more TA work done. And I think the biggest difference was not having the ability to walk around campus or like go take a quick break outside, because at the start of the pandemic, we were all asked to stay inside. Okay, the second question is really relevant for the pandemic, but also I think it'd be interesting to discuss pre-pandemic, is how do you stay motivated doing work, as well as when you fall off track, how do you get back on track?
Yeah, for me, I feel like I have to remind myself like why I'm doing this in the first place, or the task. And if that doesn't work, it's like a helpful tip is like get a partner or friend to do the homework with you, or like the task or whatever. And then if I don't get on track or like fall behind, I feel like setting like a priority list, or like what's most important right now is an easy way, or like an easy way to get on back to track, basically. So yeah.
So pretty admirable.
Yeah. I think I'm really fortunate because I was in my university life, so I'm kind of used to being busy all the time. So even if I'm not necessarily motivated to do my specific readings, let's say, I'm still motivated to be busy. So I kind of just jump around between tasks to try to keep myself motivated. So if I don't feel like doing a reading, then I'll work on an assignment. And then when I'm not motivated to work on the assignment anymore, then I'll work on a lecture. So it's kind of like productive procrastination in a way. And I would agree that I really think that like talking with people that are like in the same classes, or even just friends, having that accountability, as well as having a list of things that like I know I need to get done, because as I near the end of my degree, like I'm looking at employment and I'm looking at masters. So that's kind of like my goal in the distance that
Grad student, I don't get to go to classes as me. I don't interact with my peers as much in the same way as I did in undergrad, since we no longer really study the same things. A lot of research is very independent if you go into a research field. And oftentimes my only point of contact for people who actually know what my questions are to interpret them are my professors and my supervisors. So it's a lot more self-motivated, and I kind of get around falling into a slump by designating some certain goals for the week. And I'm very comfortable not actually meeting my goals, but when I set the goals, there's a certain intent, and it's especially satisfying to actually complete. The goals are sometimes very simple, like try to actually wake up on time and get to campus before 9 o'clock. That's pre-pandemic. Try to write like a 1-paragraph summary of either the abstract or a paper I read, and try to get my marking done before I leave school on the day I actually receive it, so I don't have something to think about. So being able to hit little check marks for myself is really motivating, because they tend to be actually very simple and very quick to do. And it helps giving a bit of a burst of motivation to keep going on with everything else that I had planned. Post-pandemic, I'm not gonna lie, I lost a lot of motivation. A big part of my motivation came when I was actually assigned a research topic for an earthquake sequence that was currently ongoing and is still going during the pandemic. And my prof was like, hey, can you look at it? And can you possibly actually write up a draft paper for this thing so we can submit for a special bulletin or something? And that was super motivating. There was something challenging ahead of me. It was something tangible. I had already been like mindlessly working on it for a while, and it looked like I could actually achieve results. And I saw it as a way, even if I couldn't submit a paper on time, it was a way to get results in and get practice in, to get me going and more interested in my research again. My personal way of starting my master's with motivation, though, was because I studied natural disasters. I actually went and visited the sites of natural disasters in person before I started my master's, as a real indicator of like the real human component of why I cared doing what I do. Yeah, motivation was a little lacking on this side though.
I think you brought up a really good point about like those little checklists. Like I make to-do lists for myself during the week, and if I'm having a particularly hard time being motivated, I'll put simple things like eat dinner, or like go for a walk, or make my bed. And then being able to check those things off my list kind of give me the motivation to attack like the bigger things on my list.
Yeah, for sure. My first item today was actually to shower. take it how you will.
Sometimes you need that on your list.
Sometimes it's helpful, especially if you're absent-minded, but it's also just nice to know that you have actually done something you really do need to do. And it's very straightforward and makes you feel better. What is my next question? This is a more technical one. So the question is, do you use any planning tools throughout the day? Have you added more, taken away as the pandemic has hit?
Yeah, so for me personally, I feel like I used to write like a lot, like plan everything in detail, but that would be like really overwhelming because like if you miss something, then all of a sudden all your plan is like not working or not in place. So I found like time blocking is a good technique, like on Google Calendar, for example. Like you would just allocate time for different, like for work or for play or like going out with friends, and then it would like easily help you rearrange after to just like drag and drop events, and I think that that's like really helpful, especially if you're like not on track. So yeah.
Yeah, I kind of did the same thing. I really didn't use a lot of tools before the pandemic just because I didn't really feel the need to. When I was interacting with people in my class every day, like I knew when my due dates were just because everyone would be talking about it, or I'd be motivated to work on an assignment because everyone was working at it at that time. So I've started using like Microsoft Calendar, like Outlook Calendar, and I found it really helpful just to kind of keep track of what I need to do and also block off times. And I've shared my calendar with some people that I'm in like group projects with, so it makes it really easy to plan things because I can kind of see when they're busy and like what they have going on in their life. And sometimes it's a good reminder that I'll see like, oh, like my friend is working on this assignment for 3 hours on Sunday. Like maybe I should schedule in some time to do that. I also use, it's an online like checklist. It's called like to-do-list or like to-do list or something like that. So I'll put in just like everything that I need to get done. And it's not really that I do try to finish everything by the end of the day or by the end of the week, but if I don't, like it's not really a big deal, or if I missed a study block, that's not really a big deal. The big part of it for me is just to be mindful of what I need to do. So writing my to-do list is more just kind of so I can see what I need to accomplish and not really for like to check it all off, because if I get to the end of the day and I didn't finish something, then I didn't finish something. Like I'll go to sleep and try again tomorrow.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I've been like trying to come up with multiple different time planning systems ever since probably like second year of my undergrad because I wasn't doing so well. And I do believe we have a section dedicated to all the things I did wrong in my undergrad that I wish I could change. But in terms of like actually trying out different techniques for time management, I've tried things similar to time blocking. Currently what I use is I draw a vertical timeline from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and I loosely write in things that I would like to do, as well as actually physically block out time I have definitely dedicated to do something. For example, from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock today, I had a D&D session that I was running, so there's no way I'm changing that time. But for everything else, it's a little more flexible, very similar to Google Calendars, where instead of like dragging and dropping, I would just redraw arrows. And if the task didn't get completed today, I would probably do it later. And then on the side, I typically have a free-floating to-do list where I check off periodically through the day, especially if there's a small task I want to do. For example, like complete my expense report for reimbursement. It's a very small task that I've been putting off for like weeks as a thing I can do when I do need to actually get something done and feel good about myself. Some other things I've seen people try, these aren't necessarily tools that I advocate for. I actually do think the original form of bullet journaling is very flexible and pretty good for planning your day. It tends to help you see in advance kind of in what works individually. So it's grabbing like a blank notebook and customizing to your own personal needs. For example, some people do write a to-do list every single day, and some people write a to-do list for every single week. And some people have tasks that they would need to repeat every single week, and it's just a nice, easy way to check mark, and it's fairly efficient. I don't think I have added any new tools since pandemic. I've been doing the vertical timeline plus a to-do list since I started grad school. And it's worked out fairly well. And what really helps is I convinced all my roommates to put up their personal school calendars on the fridge. So we all have shared calendars and we can all look at each other and be like, hey, we should be quiet while one of my roommates is practicing music, but also there's a pressure to feel somewhat productive while they are doing work.
I think it's interesting as you're like talking about how your time management has kind of evolved since you started studying. Like in past years, I have made schedules that were super, super detailed. Like every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to study like chemistry from 2 to 3. And I could never make myself follow those schedules. So I would spend all this time making them and never follow through. I found that I've had more success now when I kind of go day by day or week by week, because it's more of the like, how do I feel today? What can I realistically get done? And then blocking off times. So I feel like there's like a kind of balance to achieve between being structured, but still giving yourself freedom to like move things around.
I think it's really different, like person to person, but a big part of writing your schedule every single day, either the night before or the morning of, and readjusting on the morning of, or writing on a weekly basis, is that you can revise whether or not your plans are realistic for yourself based on like either your mental or physical health or your certain conditions. Like if you actually just lose internet access for a week, you do have to revamp your entire plans. And setting goals in a year, for the entire year, I think is great, but I think we should all be realistic and review our plans as we go along.
When I'm feeling really overwhelmed, I find it helps to like write my schedule down on paper and not on my laptop, just because it's more flexible and I can kind of draw something like abstract. And I just like, I feel like for me, like seeing a piece of paper with everything I need to do just kind of makes me feel more in control, which I have found has helped on the busier days.
I do think it's really interesting because there's a bit of a generational gap here in terms of people who use pen and paper and people who use digital software. I think all of us, except for Kala, do you use paper at all?
No,
do you use paper?
Do you know what paper is? Do you know how many trees we kill to fund your laptop? But I do think there's like a notable gap in terms of resources that people can use and like how they translate from paper to digital form, because there are like iPad Pros that you can write on. My personal feeling is that they're different, and writing by hand is always more tactile. And I do think in studies that I cannot quote or cite off the top of my head is that tactile learning is really, really helpful when it comes to memory retention, as well as like valuing the work you're doing. But I'm not so certain if it's the same when it comes to like planning your day.
Yeah, I do feel like a lot of people like on a younger level, like high school or just entering high school, I see like a lot of them with just like tablets or just like digital like laptops or just digital notes in general, like Google Docs or etc. Yeah.
I heard tablet for the first time this fall term.
How was it?
I genuinely found that it really helped because I get like bored and distracted in lectures. Like I'm not an auditory learner. I have a really hard time like obtaining things when I'm being spoken to. And so I found it really helpful to just be able to like annotate slides, because I found a lot of the time in lectures, like I was trying to write down all the content that was on the slide and trying to like incorporate other things that the prof was saying, and I could just like never get it all down. So I found that I'm actually retaining more when I'm not worried about getting everything down. I'm actually like listening for the key points.
Yeah, I think this might be actually a separate topic of like, learning styles as well as like the best ways to intake information. But I do see value in terms of like pen and paper, not just because it's flexible, and like not to say Google Calendar isn't great. I actually have a Google Calendar that I use as well. But the ease of being able to actually just drag and drop is sometimes almost a little too easy. That's my personal stance, is that you put a lot less care into thinking, can I actually achieve this? And that definitely depends. Like it goes person to person, what's actually the best thing for you. But it's like you have a Google Calendar, it's got like 5 blocks in it and you aren't using it. It may be, worthwhile trying pen and paper system just because it's a little more intentional and you actually do have to like tack it on a wall or something.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it, like a big part of it is like also subjective. Like you have to like explore and like try the ways, like the best way. So yeah.
Yeah. In first year, I had a whiteboard calendar that had the 4 months of the terms on it, and I would write every single due date on the calendar in like different colors. So, like midterms was red, assignments were green, lab reports were blue, and I found that worked really well for me in first year.
Yeah, I definitely think when you have a lot of due dates, it's super great to actually have like a large scale overview. For example, this is again more of a study tip, but like once you have your syllabus for your course, you should absolutely take note of what is due and what your expectations are, so you can plan appropriately for them, even if you don't write it down. All right, next one. What did you learn, if you did learn anything during the pandemic, that you'll continue to do afterwards? That's kind of, did you pick up any new tips or tricks during the pandemic that you're doing to help keep yourself accountable that you'll continue afterwards?
Yeah, one of the tips I found is like having your friend over, like it makes you accountable. And I felt like after the pandemic, there's less of a routine. So obviously, it was like a hard transition. So after that, having like a friend over and you like plan stuff in the morning, that really helped, I guess. And I feel like even after the pandemic, that's much better than just going with the flow or like the routine that school gave us. Or yeah, one of the best.
I feel like I have very different feelings about it just because, like, when everything shut down and when the university closed, everyone pretty much moved home. And since everyone came to Waterloo to go to university, home for people was like in British Columbia, it was in Alberta, it was in Toronto, it was in Ottawa. So, like, since I guess March, it hasn't been possible to physically see like any of my friends. Like, I genuinely have not seen anyone. And I think that I've learned from that kind of the importance of like spending time by myself because when I was in regular life, I was always busy 100% of the time. And then I found that I was like getting overworked, I was burning out. But the pandemic kind of forced me to like spend time by myself, relax a little. And now I definitely see the value in like checking in on yourself. Like, have I slept enough? Like, have I eaten enough? Like, am I doing this project because I genuinely want to do it or am I doing it for someone else? So I think I'm gonna try to continue like touching base with myself, as weird as that sounds, after the pandemic's done.
I have something similar in like terms of it's not an actual functional tool, but it's more like my interaction with people, which is something I'd like to keep up. And that's basically like checking in with people that I don't see, checking in with myself, whether or not I'm too tired, if I've taken on too much, if it's something I'm genuinely passionate about. And also being aware that there's only so many things you can get done with your day. And planning for your entire day to be productive is unrealistic for most people. So I actually do plan in rest time. I plan in like music time as well as like video game time or just bum around. And ideally that I feel comfortable doing that and taking those steps to take care of myself as well as check in with people around me that I care about. And I think a really important part of that is actually to be very careful with who you surround yourself with. And this is, fortunately, this is a professional development workshop. And it's very important to be careful with people you surround yourself with. You generally, during a pandemic, don't want to be surrounding yourself with unmotivated people or people who are video gaming all the time, unless it's during that hour. During work hours, as Rebecca, you said, you kind of like check in with your friends, or you can see their schedules if they're doing work, and you feel like, hey, I can do some work too, and you feel good about it. I think those things are important.
I think this pandemic has definitely showed me at least like who the important people are, as bad as that is, but like with it harder to be like to stay connected, it's all the more important to like check in on your team. Or even when I was working over the summer, like it was so important to check in with like my supervisors each day and be like, hey, like I haven't talked to you in a few days, but just letting you know, here's where I'm at with this project. Like I think I need this more time. Like there's a lot more explicit communication needed because we're not just in the same office as people or like happening to like be in the same class or like pass by them. So like being more intentional has been something that I've really found important.
Yeah, I would definitely label this as like the support network tool. Refining and developing a support network is really important. And it's really hard for some people sometimes if, say, for example, you didn't have too many friends going through the pandemic, or this is your first year and you're starting off in a pandemic. Difficult. And I would encourage anyone going to like a first year situation or people who didn't manage to stay in touch with their friends is to reach out, because there's definitely other people in the same position as you are if you need support. And I've seen a comment from professors online before, is like, join a Discord chat, join a Hangout chat where you do studying. And if it devolves into a more casual setting, just leave. Like, do what's best for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people on like the high school level, like they fall to like peer pressure and they just like they would. I see a lot of people like they want to study and then some of their friends like just like invite them to the game and they just like lose track of the time and yeah, they just fall to. And I think that it's a really good tip that you just like be aware of people you surround yourself with.
In university, I've definitely learned, and I think everyone learns this eventually, like it's so important to do things that you want to do and do things for yourself.
Yeah, we definitely can't speak to the people who maybe like are forced into certain positions, because that does exist as well. But like for what freedoms you do have, if you do have the choice, try to hang out with people you care about and who care about you. And I think that's really important. Moving on to happier topics and very fun ones. Looking back on the past few years of your life, this includes perhaps high school and undergrad, what do you wish you had done differently? Now, this is outside of pandemic, so this could be an interesting question.
I feel like for me personally, like at the beginning of high school, of course, like I wouldn't research like what I want to go into. I didn't explore like the careers I can possibly go into, or like the like we just had the mentality of like grades don't matter, and right now nothing matters as in like high school, and you can just have fun all day and things like that. I think like I would have like what I would have done differently is I would have maybe like explored my career options, what I could go into, or like explored as much like content and like as much content and media. So yeah.
For me, I think this even goes back to high school, but like I am always a really busy person. I know I've mentioned this quite a few times, but even in high school, like I had 3 jobs. I was in every club. Like I was always busy all the time and trying to like find the next thing that was gonna like push me to that next level. Like what is something new I can learn? What is something that's gonna be like useful? How can I expand myself in these certain ways? And like that's great and fantastic. And I'm really glad I did that. But I think that I was so focused on my academics and achieving all that that I kind of let like my social life and my friends kind of take the back burner spot. So I think if I were to do things differently, I would like bad as this sounds, like study less, I guess, but I think I would put more emphasis on like going to the movie night with my friends, like having fun. Like you don't need to be productive 100% of the time. It's also productive and important to take those breaks and to hang out with your friends and to form those valuable connections, because you don't know like where those connections could take you in the future, or like just like the happiness that those connections can give you and other people.
Yeah, I like sit somewhere between the two of you in terms of like, I spent most of my high school life having fun. I intentionally did apply to an arts high school just so I could paint all day, show up to class like super sleepy, not paying attention to any of my academics, with no intention of going to university. And I'm actually really glad I had that experience. There's like definitely something I lost out there in terms of my academics, being ready for university when I did decide to go. But it was a really valuable experience in that like, I know that there are fun things for me out there, and like I know there are paths outside of academia for those who choose to take it. And in terms of like my actual schooling and grades, I wouldn't say I ever did exceptionally well. I highly advise against taking 8 courses in one term, especially if you're enrolled at the University of Waterloo. It does not do anything for your transcript. And the most valuable lesson I learned out of there is like there's so many things I'm interested in, but I only have so much time to dedicate myself to all those things. Until I master one of those things or feel confident and happy with where I am, it's maybe not the greatest idea to learn the next thing at the same time. I can learn those things later. So that's a thing I would have changed both in, well, actually, I'm pretty happy with my high school experience. The only thing I would change there was probably my confidence level in applying for university and not just goofing around. Maybe doing proper research before applying to university, since I had to make up for a bunch of courses that I didn't have. But also not taking it too seriously, I think was really nice. Like the pressure was very different. And for some people, you do need that pressure. For some people, you don't. So it's always good to evaluate and check in with yourself. But for university, I had too many interests and I didn't do any of them well. And I think it's really important to keep in mind is like you have finite like willpower and time and energy to do all those things that you're interested in. It's always worthwhile exploring your options, but like sometimes you need to take it easy, coast a little bit, do what makes sense. And then once you have the energy to do things, you can actually look at your real options and really take advantage of them.
And also it's perfectly fine to do something, like try it, realize you don't like it, and then just like fail.
Oh, absolutely.
Like that's perfectly okay.
I do think there's a bit of a misconception from the people I interact with is that like it's bad to fail. It really, really isn't. It's a little embarrassing, but it teaches you such good lessons. Like my transcript is full of not great marks. And that's when I realized, hey, it's a really dumb idea for myself to take numerous courses that I'm not ready to be taking. My social life was basically non-existent for a couple of years. I was really lucky that people checked in on me and actually like invited me to things, but failing is fine. Like once you fail, the best thing you can do is to learn from it and to reevaluate, you know, was that a complete waste of time? Almost never. But what can I learn from this?
Yeah, I feel like there's always like a balance between like the social life and like the academic life. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is mostly us two giving advice to the high schoolers. It really sucks to public rankings available. It's super embarrassing, but you can definitely like forge onwards and learn a lot from that.
I think in high school you're also in like a really unique position. Also now because of the pandemic, but like high school is hard. You have to work hard. Like not discounting any of that, but like I found at least like you do have more time to like hang out with your friends and like not have so many responsibilities. Like take full advantage of that. Like go hang out with your friends or like watch that movie and stay up late at night, because those like you're gonna look back and be like, oh, like I wish I would have done that.
Or if you're like me, I wish I did a lot more math when I was in high school. Like quite straight up, frankly, I wish I did a lot more harder maths because they're interesting, but it was embarrassing amongst my friends to be like doing so much like studying. And there's no shame as long as you don't let too many parts of your life slip. In high school, it's also interesting that you can't really choose your friends. You have a limited pool of people to hang out with. And it's around then you kind of figure out, like, do I actually want to hang out with these people, or do I want to dedicate more time to my hobbies while still maintaining some sort of social connection, because it is important.
Obviously, there's like peer pressure everywhere, but I found that in university, it's a lot less. Like you're going to be in the same classes with people and stuff like that, but people are so much more receptive to you having interests outside of like your program or your social group. Like the general consensus is just like, this person's doing that, like great for them.
Yeah.
Like, and in first year, it's really like important because I was really nervous to join clubs. Like I did not join anything. Like I was just like really nervous about it. But like go apply for that executive position. Like if you don't get it, that's fine. Like it might be a little embarrassing. You might be disappointed, but like literally no one's gonna remember. So like put yourself out there.
And the next question I had is very personal, so answer as comfortable as you are. So the question is, what goals are you currently working on, and how do you structure your days, weeks, months to actually get closer to that goal?
Yeah. So right now, like one of my like biggest focuses is like university, because obviously like I'm gonna be applying to university. So like research, university research, and like program research is one of the top priorities, and of course like the admission average and everything, all the extracurriculars. So I feel like planning for like what helps me move closer to that goal is like planning ahead. Planning ahead like helps you like look at like the due dates, the like email people beforehand, and it gives you like a lot of time that you're not stressed, so you can like take your time. So I think that's like a big part of it for me, at least.
What goal am I working towards? I think this has really changed because of the pandemic, because my goal before was like I wanted to do field research, I wanted to go work in the Arctic, like I wanted to do all these things, but those are quite honestly literally not attainable anymore just because all of that is canceled because of the pandemic. So I've kind of really taken a step back, I guess, because like the goal I wanted to attain, I can't. So I've kind of like not struggled, but I haven't really switched gears to anything else. Right now I'm just kind of focusing on my courses and being successful and looking into masters, which is a lot more work than looking into undergrad programs, just because like there's not really one specific area that has the information for it. So I've kind of been tentatively looking into my future, but I have genuinely for the most part just kind of been taking it easy, which isn't the like best answer for this question, but
Well, I think it's fun sometimes, right? Sometimes like our goals get snatched out from in front of us and we realize we can't achieve them, or they're not achievable right now. And sometimes we just need to like take a break, get to know ourselves better, and like reevaluate. Do you still want to pursue that goal maybe in a different way? Or
well, I 100% still want to pursue that. Like I want to work in the geosciences. Like I want to have that field and lab experience. I was in Nunavut for my co-op for a week last fall, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So that's still a goal that I want to attain, but I recognize that that kind of needs to be put on hold for a bit. So I guess I've been mostly focusing on now is just like relaxing, like taking care of myself. And I think that is an equally worthy thing, like a goal to work towards, because it's
Yeah,
just
I
like
think
so
so.
important. Yeah, like I want to go into like when I can finally achieve that goal, I want to be able to be like, I am rested, I am ready, I am prepared, like I have studied up, I know the background information. So I guess like now I'm just trying to prepare for when I can start trying to achieve those goals.
And I think it's really good to like keep your goals in mind, even if you do have to put like explicit progress that you had planned for it on hold. There are many things you could be doing, as including like taking a break and being rested. And once you're rested and ready, even if the position still isn't open, you can start looking to like what can you do to make your resume more competitive. What can you do
Exactly.
that shows that you're interested in this project, and perhaps you might even find like another alternative career goal as you're doing it. I think the important thing to do is to not like stop where you are. Resting isn't stopping. Resting, I think resting should always be like an active choice. If you're working to the point where you just kind of have to rest, that's
See, because
probably a
that's the
different talk.
thing. Like I was very busy all the time and I did feel burned out and I feel like I was like kind of forced by this pandemic to like take a break, but now I definitely see the worth in it. And like this is going to sound so lame because this is literally a hackathon, but I was like, I want to learn Python. So I've just been kind of like going through modules, like I'm taking some courses on it. So that's kind of like a complete side goal that I had put to the side because I had bigger plans in mind, but like reaching out to those kind of like little ideas I had but never had the time for has been really nice.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of interesting stories where it's very unfortunate that some people have not been able to continue employment, but they have been able to actually rediscover some of their hobbies, some of their passions, and actually turn them into business ventures. It sounds very difficult, but like that does actually showcase how passionate they are now that they have that time freed up. And I think it's really hard, and then kind of this is a big statement, and hopefully nobody takes me into context. Is that like there's a lot of pressure to like be doing work and being productive all the time, and sometimes you do need to be freed up from your responsibilities, which you think are important, but you know it might not be your passion, or even something you remotely care about. It's just to keep you going, and you lose energy for your actual passions.
Isn't that the thing? Like, there's a difference between a job and like a career. I definitely did not say that correctly, but like, there's a difference between like doing a job just because like you need a paycheck and you have to do that job and like thoroughly enjoying your work.
Yeah, and I don't actually think it's necessary to always enjoy your work, but it should be ideally if you have the flexibility at the time, it should be something you're comfortable with, and like even if you don't enjoy it, it does fund whatever passions you do have. So I think it's just always important to remember what your goals are. Which on that topic, I'm sure I have some goals. It's hard to elucidate, so I should have thought about these before I wrote these questions. I have some academic goals, and the overall arching goal to that would either be working towards like just future research. I'm not sure if I want to do a PhD yet, but I would like to stay in either academia or stay in the research field. And a big part of that is to write papers and to get publishable results. Which is a talk in and of itself. Why should you absolutely feel the pressure to publish? But there is a lot of value to it. But just keeping myself like in check, remembering that I'm working towards certain goals, like completing my thesis on time, which was a big goal I set for myself. Let's do a master's, see how we feel, as well as staying connected with people I care about has been a really big goal of mine ever since I started grad school, actually. Because I haven't been very good at it in the past. I usually let people come to me, and it's a lot easier when you have a physical place for people to come visit you. Now it requires actually actively scheduling people online, or staying in touch, giving people phone calls every once in a while. So I'd say I've got like people goals, which is like to stay in touch with people I care about, and I've got like academic goals, which is to continue in my academic career and then check in with myself every once in a while if this is actually what I want to continue doing. Okay, this is a question I think Khaled also had. So let's say you're completely overwhelmed. Between myself and Rebecca, I know we've both experienced burnout at some point, if not very frequently. So let's say we're completely overwhelmed. Maybe not even with burnout. Maybe you've just been assigned 20 things by your employer, or your high school teacher has given you like 10 assignments, and you're like, why?
Applications for university are up.
Yep. Where do you start? How do you break down your tasks that like seem insurmountable when you look at it all at once?
Yeah, I feel like first after like writing everything like down in a list or like typing it out on your like computer, after that, I would like set a priority. So like if it's important, like and urgent, I would do it right now. If it's just if it's important but not urgent, I would like plan for it. And if it's not important or urgent, I would just not do it. I think that's like really help, like a simple go to way just to plan out, like especially when you're like overwhelmed. So yeah.
That's a really good point about like making your list, because I do that too. Like when I'm overwhelmed, the first thing I do is write out a list of all the things I have to do and then kind of go through and get rid of the things that like you don't actually have to do, or something that can maybe be pushed to like another day or another week. Because sometimes we're so overwhelmed with things and like, yes, it's all things we have to get done, but not everything needs to get done right then. So I'll like make my list, get rid of things that like don't actually have to be done, try to figure out what's flexible and what's not. Because there's things like work or a group meeting that you absolutely like can't just not do or push aside. And then I'll kind of schedule in the stuff that is more flexible around that.
I have an exciting counter example where instead of just getting a lot of work all at once, you get one large, seemingly impossible task, and you do need to figure out how to break it down yourself. So for example, as a master's student, I do need to do a thesis, I do need to do a defense, and I would ideally like to publish alongside with those. And those are like three really big tasks that starting to look at, you're like, how do I write like a 200-page like thesis? How do you do that? And it's very similar to what the two of you do, which is writing everything down. So what I do is I start at a very high level. I need to write my thesis. And the components to writing my thesis, I'll break it down into I need to do research and I actually need to do literature review. And I need to plan time for experiment failures, as well as like, unexpected events, perhaps like whoever has my data, their data is corrupted, etc. And then I break down all those things into like small tasks that are small enough that I can actually tackle some of those things on a daily basis. And then I can have larger tasks that I feel like that I can complete in a month or two. So I usually just like scale down to an appropriate size, not to like the minute size, but I look at like larger tasks, break them down into reasonable chunks, and they also turn into milestones, which is really convenient. So I can also check in at that point.
Yeah, I feel
Go
like
ahead.
sorry. Yeah. I feel also like in high school, there's like you generally get like a long-term like project, like an ISP or like a culminating activity, and then it's up to you to like break it down and set up tasks for yourself. So it's like really important to like not leave it until the end, but like always have like a plan for it, basically. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys experience this too, but I find with myself when I'm really overwhelmed, I'll be like working on one task I have to complete, but then I'll be stressed because I'll be like, oh, but I also have to do this. And then I'll jump to another task and then I'll be like, oh, but like this is also due. And I find that I'm like jumping between tasks without like actually really accomplishing anything. So a big part for me is just saying like, I'm going to work on this thing. Like I know I have everything else, but try to like kind of zone that out and just like focus on that one task, get as much as I can done, and then move to the next thing.
I have something similar where if for some reason I've forgotten about something, because the only time I have a lot of stuff to do is when it piles up because I've forgotten, which ideally you would never have. But in the instance where I have like 2, 3, 4 competing interests that are all due really, really soon, what I'll do is I'll look at the mark breakdown, and this is a trick for undergrads who are completely overwhelmed, is I'll look at the mark breakdown, and then I'll look at if the course is a prerequisite for a different course I need to take in the future. And then I think about, will I actually learn something doing this assignment? And using that, I prioritize, and I'm like, I'm okay if I don't submit an assignment. Or I look at the course syllabus, like, does it say I can have 2 assignments or 1 assignment that's dropped? So being very careful about how you spend your time in terms of importance is really helpful as well. And then, like, I guess the tack on is when you're actually legitimately burnt out, and even though you don't have a lot of tasks, you don't feel like you do them. I personally do suggest just taking the time. Your priority task at that point is to rest.
This is advice from like a university student that's like it goes along with what you said. It's probably not the best thing to say, but like it's something realistic that everyone's going to encounter when they go to university, because there is going to be a time where like you've left things too late, or just things took longer than you thought, or you ended up not being able to work on an assignment because something else came up. And it's looking at that grade breakdown, because sometimes like the 2% assignment is just not worth the stress that it's going to like give you. It's not worth the time that it's going to take away studying away from a midterm. So kind of like recognizing what's worth it and what's not worth it. because that was
Yes.
not me in first year, because I would spend like
Especially
hours.
for those 2% assignments, sometimes they are designed for you to like understand the work. Like you do a bunch of route work so you are more comfortable for the final exam. But for those 2% assignments where you legitimately can't do them, they don't affect your mark, I reuse them as study material. So like you have the opportunity to still learn and you get some value out of that assignment. And you do take a bit of a hit to your grade perhaps, but not as big as doing it poorly and then still having to redo it for the exam. So there's a lot of trade-offs, and I think university is an interesting learning environment where you can learn how to assess the importance of certain things without like hurting yourself too much.
Yeah.
Ideally not hurting yourself at all, but like once you are there, like how do you deal with it?
Or even just things like if you have lectures and readings for a class, like sometimes it's just not like realistic to be able to do every single reading that you're assigned for every single class. So kind of picking out like what content do I not understand from the lecture that maybe I do need to do the readings to learn more, or like what do I understand from the lecture that I can maybe skip out on those readings, which is very personal. Like it
I
differs from person to person.
personally advocate for optimizing your learning experience. If you know you hate readings, like figure out the best way to get your readings done. Figure out how to read as little as possible. Learn the tricks for like where the important content is, usually at the end of the paragraph at the beginning of a topic. Learn the tricks that help you get through without wasting your time. You don't need to devote like 100% concentration to every single word. You can break down your concentration as well. So I think it's actually worthwhile investing time in learning how to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my friends too, like I see them like, for example, you have like a limited time for like an assignment or like a culminating activity and you're like already late on it. So I feel like they like stay on the same like small task that wouldn't be as important as just finishing the assignment or the biggest part of the assignment. So I think looking at the like mark breakdown, that's a really nice tip.
Yeah, looking at the mark breakdown, knowing what this is for and how it can help you best is one of the easiest ways to get through an assignment. Sometimes you'll run into situations where it's not clear at all, but for the most part, it is.
And that goes back to like learning what's worth it and what's not worth it. Like if something's not worth a lot in a paper you're doing, then like don't dwell on that for hours. Like go to the next part so you can get the bigger chunk of the marks.
Yeah, I think this does actually answer one of Khaled's questions. How do I decide how long I should work on a certain task? And a big part is just knowing what the purpose of that task is. Especially if you can get rid of the task and it doesn't benefit you to keep it, absolutely get rid of it. You may run into some regrets, like you forget to do an administrative task that's actually important, but I think it will be rare and it'll save up a lot of like mental space. I'll also continue on with one of Khaled's other questions, which is, what if something doesn't go as planned? How do you deal with that?
For me, other than setting a priority list or rearranging my time, I would look at like what's most important, like just like you said, and then with the help of like the Google Calendar, I would like make blocks for events for the most important tasks, and then I would set times and then set a backup time too for if something doesn't go as planned. And if that doesn't go as planned too, that's why I use the Google Calendar. You can just drag and drop and rearrange stuff based on priority. So I think that's what does it for me.
Yeah, I mean, things not going to plan is just a realistic part of life. I find it's important to not dwell on it. Like you can say like, oh, this didn't, like my time management didn't work out the way I wanted to, or like this project didn't work out the way I wanted to, but you can't stay in that moment. Like feel your disappointment or like feel your stress, but then like get moving to the next thing. So like, for example, I had a midterm that was scheduled for like next Wednesday, and then the prof messaged us on Wednesday and was saying like the date was moved to the next day. And so I was like, I thought I had the weekend to study for this midterm, but now like it's in 24 hours, I'm not prepared. And so the next part of that was kind of going through my to-do list, seeing what I could push off. Like I could do lectures on the weekend, like that wasn't that important. I had some quick assignments that I could finish up and then just doing your time. And I think this is a really good point about not making schedules that are too strict, because you're going to need flexibility eventually to be able to move things around. So it's important to not leave things to the last minute, because then you don't have an opportunity to move things.
Yeah, I think the first part is like, what if things don't go as planned, is to actually plan for that to happen in the first place. know yourself really well, predict something, like a certain thing will take a certain amount of time, or you're looking for a result and or solving a problem, and it will take maybe 10-15 minutes, but be aware that you should dedicate some amount of time. I prefer having a bit of overflow time every single day, just for any of my tasks that don't go smoothly. I don't actually designate time to specific tasks for overflow unless they're really big ones. So I just have a general loose chunk of time that I can work with in case things don't go as planned. And the other part of it is, yeah, like Rebecca said, being aware that things sometimes just don't work out. Sometimes you just look at the failure, or you look at the thing you didn't complete. You let yourself feel disappointed. I think it's perfectly fine. And then you reassess, was it reasonable? And what can you learn from that experience? Is that work salvageable, or do you have to drop it? And I think that's, the more you do that, the better you get at it. You get to know yourself better. You get to be realistic with your time frame. And you do get to experience that oh so important failure, which I think is really hard to get in high school these days.
Yeah, kind of going with due dates and academic assignments and stuff like that. Some terms, what I've done is when I input all my due dates into my calendar, I'll schedule them a couple hours before the actual due date. So I'm ideally I'm gonna get it done in time for the due date that I put in my calendar. But if something happens and I end up being late, I have that buffer of 3 hours to still get that assignment done. But in my mind, it's due 3 hours earlier, so it helps me kind of stay on top of things.
I think we're getting close to wrapping up, so I'd like to present a more interesting and less maybe time management specific question. And that are, what are your thoughts on feeling the need to constantly be productive? Do you feel that desire to constantly be productive?
I think I do, but I think productivity looks different. I view watching a movie with my friends or just sitting on my bed on my phone as productive, because if I'm just laying in my bed doing nothing, then that's relaxation that I needed. So I feel like everything can be productive just depending on the way you're looking at it.
Did you ever have a point where you felt that relaxation wasn't productive?
I definitely have, when it was I would have things that I would need to do and that relaxation would get in the way of doing it, but then I would really think about it and it's why do I feel the need to have relaxation right now? And usually I could trace it back to I didn't sleep well last night or something that was a legitimate reason for needing to have that relaxation.
Yeah, in the beginning of senior high school, I feel you would have a big pressure, even peer pressure from constantly being productive. If you're playing or relaxing, I feel you would feel guilty for that, and I never thought of it as productive at the beginning, and especially if you're overwhelmed and you're jumping between tasks because you think this also have to do this, I also have to do this. So I think the thinking that relaxation or having setting time for yourself, I think that's also it should also be considered productive.
I just want to clarify that my thoughts on this is ever changing. If you were to ask me this question 3 months ago, I would say that taking a nap is not productive, or playing video games is not productive.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because from my personal experience, there is so much pressure to constantly appear to be productive even if you aren't productive. Again, I can't cite the paper on this, but certain employees in certain companies feel that they are more productive by sending more emails when really they aren't actually getting anything done. And it gives the illusion of being a better employer by constantly responding to your emails. But your quality of work may suffer if you're constantly being interrupted. So this is a more broad topic that I kind of wanted to bring to our audience to consider, what is productivity really? What does it look like? And can you rethink how you think productivity? Is taking a rest when you need it productive? Arguably, yes. Or if you do legitimately have something that's incredibly crucial, then can you sacrifice a bit of sleep and catch up on that later?
Yeah, I feel also you may get caught up on stuff that you may think is productive. For example, you join a club and you just don't like it, but you don't leave and you're just caught up in the work that they're doing and the work you have to do. But in the you have to take a step back to look at the bigger picture and just see if that's productive for you or not. To you, if you want to do that. No.
That's a really good point, like focusing on yourself. Like, is this productive for me? Because someone else's productive is going to be different than your productive.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is my personal opinion is that we should all learn to say no a little more frequently and value our time more seriously. For example, Rebecca, you did say yes to like showing up today, and I'm super grateful. And I'm hoping that like you get something out of this conversation as well, right? You're not here just because you felt pressured to show up, because it is okay to say no. And like the people who get offended, hopefully they're not people you need to keep in your life. But if you like provide a no that's very respectful, be like, hey, I'm actually busy, or I need some time, most people will understand, I think. And it's okay to say no to being on 4 clubs and being on like multiple executive committees. It's okay to say no.
And maybe that's something we can learn too, like learning how to accept being told no.
Yeah, I do think so. It's hard when people say no to you as well. And I think it would make things a lot easier if everyone were more understanding that time is like precious. I think I have this sign up here. This is not my sign, but the sign says time is precious and waste it wisely. It's a joke, but like time is yours. Don't let other people like infringe on your time if you don't want to give it to them. In that case, you're like willingly offering it. And it really helps in like the mindfulness of like, what are you doing with your time?
Yeah, and also have a point on being productive. Like if you're really productive because you're working all day on like a club or a team, but you don't enjoy that club or team,
That ain't
then
productive.
that's not productive. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
even mean
always
anything.
while reevaluating, like, like what is this for? And I'll go back to like, does it help you achieve your goal in any like significant way? Um, so that's a fun question. I do have a question from Khaled, which is what are some time management strategies for students? We did somewhat cover that in terms of tools that we use, but do you guys, other than like valuing your own time, do you guys have anything additional to add on to that?
For students, like specifically, I found that like looking over the lecture, so or the content, like the textbook, for example, like looking over that before the actual like lecture with the teacher, like helps you because like you're not constantly taking new information. You already have like questions planned to ask the teacher or the professor. So I think that's a really good tip. A lot of people like miss out on.
Yeah, I would say that's actually like a pretty solid time management strategy, which is reduce the amount of work you have to do by prepping for it. Like if you go into a lecture prep to intake information, then you're going to be a lot more successful and you can spend less time going over it later.
Yeah, I think also a good time management strategy is being realistic with how much time you should spend on things. Because if you're spending like 5 hours like reading one lecture, then you're spending too long on that and it's not worth your time anymore.
Less so time management and more so support is check in with other people to see if what you're doing is actually reasonable, and be realistic when you hear their responses. Hearing someone spend 10 hours working on one problem, maybe they're not telling you the truth, or maybe they don't have a good time management strategy. But like keep an ear out for what other people are doing and consider whether or not it would be helpful for you to do the same thing. It might not be, but it's interesting to hear what other people are doing.
Also, don't undervalue the like contribution your peers can have, because if like 6 people do a reading or 6 people attend a lecture and then you have a conversation with them, each person's going to take something different from that lecture. Like I know personally for me, sometimes I've learned so much the 15 minutes before I walked into a test because people were just kind of like spouting out things they thought were important, and then things that I like didn't even know before I walked into the test, once I sat down, that was the first question on it and I knew the answer because someone else had taught me.
Yeah, in terms of exams, some people feel more nervous, like being there in advance, and some people feel significantly better by actually scoping out the location. And they can then relax enough to like, they've been in the environment without the actual test situation. And so they've associated with like a more relaxed environment. And when they actually get there, they can focus a lot better. So it's just figuring out what study methods work best for you is probably the best time management strategy you can have.
Yeah, exactly. Like don't spend so much time writing notes if you learn better like just listening, like just sitting there and listening.
Yeah, and if like being social doesn't work for you, don't do it. If you do legitimately study better on your own, by all means, do it. And I do think every once in a while you should try to break out your mold just in case you're doing something and you're like stagnating. That's especially when you should try changing things up just a little to see how it affects your like performance.
And you can do both. Like I don't like talking to people before tests just because it makes me really anxious. but like I can see the value in it now. So I'll like be a part of those conversations and like talk about it. And then once I either like get overwhelmed or like just don't want to be there anymore, then like it's okay to be like, I want to go study by myself. Like
Yeah,
it's fine to stop doing something if it's not working.
it very much goes back to like feeling comfortable saying no. Don't feel obliged to stay around, even though you've like joined. You've gotten the value out of it. And if you're not producing value and you're not obtaining value, it's time to leave.
I think that's the like kind of the basis of this whole presentation. Like learning to say no and like learning what's worth your time and other time. Like, am I giving anything to this task that I'm doing, or am I receiving anything from this task that I'm doing? If the answers are both no, then like maybe you should reevaluate.
Yeah, and it's okay if you just want to take a break. But if you have work to do, time to fail.
Yeah, at the beginning of like this year, I would think like studying with my friends is not as productive. Like I never thought of it as, but after like a while, I tried it and I felt like I could get some value out of that. So I feel like exploring your options is always exploring your options is like a good general tip.
Yeah. And then we are at our final question, which is, do you have any general tips for our audience? Our audience, as I've been told, is probably high schoolers and undergraduate students.
I think the biggest tip I have for like undergraduate students and high school students is try out new things and learn about yourself. Like learn what doesn't work for you, learn what does work for you, learn what your motivations are, because the better you know yourself, the better you can implement strategies to time manage better.
Yeah, I feel like we covered like most of the things, but like I said, like knowing like the how important or urgent the task is at hand can help you like really organize and control your time. And I feel like once you like control your time or like you're not overwhelmed anymore, you have like much more like confidence in what you're doing. So yeah.
I'd like to say is that it's okay to actually not know what your passion is, and not know what you're working towards. But do
I have no idea.
Yeah, do some checklists for yourself and evaluate yourself every once in a while. Like, have I found a passion? Have I tried something new to help me discover my passion? And again, it's actually okay if you don't have one, but it's always really helpful to kind of move along and don't feel like you're stagnating or wasting your time by having some sort of tangible goal. So evaluate, what your goals are, even if they're like, I need to help my parents maintain like the house or whatever. Like there are some responsibilities that I've been given. And if you're not working on your own project, it's okay to be working on others in the meantime. I think it's a little counter to what we were saying earlier, that you should always be working for yourself. But sometimes if you don't really know what it is, you do need to take the time to explore some other avenues, maybe do some things for other people, before you find out what you do want to do yourself. And it's always okay to tell people what your passion is and then completely change it.
To add to that, because I think it's a really important discussion to have in university, because it seems like everyone in university like has their act together, is super passionate, like they want to apply to med school, they want to be an optometrist, and especially in earth science, like people don't usually go into earth science if they're not passionate about it, just because it's such kind of an obscure field. But I found myself kind of in that rut in first and second year, because everyone around me was collecting minerals, looking at rocks, they were super passionate, loving everything that we were learning, and I just wasn't. And I struggled for a long time with that, kind of being like, why am I not enjoying this or having a passion as much as my peers are? But like, I recognize that maybe just like I haven't come across what I'm going to be passionate about. And it doesn't mean that it's not out there, but like it makes it all the more important to try new things, because maybe like the 20th thing you try will be something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I'll like voice that as well, because I went in mostly for fun and I got rejected from my preferred, my preferred program. So I went mostly as my backup because I thought it'd be interesting. I thought like rocks were cool, and I thought the universe was cool, and I knew we'd be covering both those topics. And I thought that it would be a good time to discover what I was interested in. And while I like didn't necessarily discover my passion while I was like in my first couple of years of undergrad, I was interested in it enough to continue learning about it and like opening myself to new avenues. And do not say, like, if you have the ability to, between something you really care about and between something you're being told to do, if you absolutely have to do the thing you're being told to do, try to get a little bit of the thing you're passionate about in as well. But if you can, try to do the thing you're really interested in. And it's okay to find out you don't actually like it. I feel like at the high school age, sometimes you're maybe are not as aware of like the reality is like industry or maybe there's a few like hard components of it that you're missing out and you only see the glamour, it's okay to change your mind about what you're passionate about.
Yeah, it's like at high school, like it's really hard to like know the industry or like the job or what you actually do on the job. So
Yeah, it's okay to take your time.
Yeah. And like I started off in geophysics just because 17-year-old me looked at it and was like, this sounds interesting. But when I got there, I was like, I don't enjoy this. So like it's okay to switch because 17 or 18-year-old you doesn't know what you want to do for the rest of your life in like most cases, and that's okay.
Okay, well, thank you for, I guess, everyone coming today. I think myself and Khaled should be available for a live Q&A session afterwards. So we'll be around. Thanks, Rebecca, for showing up and for giving us your thoughts.
Of course, thanks for having me.